60 or so percent of your training should be about getting better. Another 20 or so percent, we're competing. And then about 10% of the time, we're trying to chase death.
Dr. Andy Galpin, leading human performance scientist who has dedicated his life to researching and optimizing physical and cognitive performance in athletes.
It is not only executing the movement, but doing it with complete focus and intent.
One of the research that I saw was the impact of growth hormone release after a sauna is hundreds and hundreds of fold.
Look, I'll probably leave this exact recording and go get in a sauna.
For those people that have optimized their programming and their lifestyle, those individuals would not require any sort of deload week. They could just train every single week.
What should you do when you get into the gym? Is cardio before, after, both?
General rule of thumb is...
Okay, Andy, thank you very much for joining us. Look forward to speaking to you. Second time in the mix. I brought a friend this time. Looking forward to diving deep in some of the topics which we covered last time.
Absolute pleasure, man. Andy, huge fan. Mike and I, both sports background. I did professional basketball, so I did my pause. I did 4 torn ACLs, did a lot of rehab, did a lot of interesting things. But every time I listen to you, your content comes out, I'm just like, learn something new. So we've been looking very much forward to this and the opportunity to talk. And we want to do the following thing. We want to deep dive into specific areas. We're going to entry it in a more general way where the question is the following. I've heard that over the last several years, couple of years, a lot of new research comes out that tells people that what we've learned in the past is actually not true and there's new insights. But then on the opposite side, the other 50% of people are saying, hey, the things we did 30 years ago is exactly working perfectly. Don't change anything. So we would love to find out what you actually think. Did something break through recently? Or are we still doing the same thing we did 30 years ago and we should, stay to that?
Oh boy, what a fantastic question and topic. The short answer to that is there's a reason we say science is a verb and not a noun, right? So science itself is an action. It is progressing, it is moving, and it is never to be taken as utter and all gospel. So in our area, like sports performance, exercise science, health, the way that we can think about this is that science should be taken as only one of the 3 pillars of what's called evidence-based practice. So that's in the end, that's what we all want to be, is evidence-based. But the scientific publications are one of those 3 pillars. The next one is your personal and actual experience. And then the third one is what experts in the field have seen and recommended and all that. Such to say, the science only gives us a place to start. It is never supposed to and never ever should be taken as the start and the stop of any clinical practice. It is what is most likely to work most of the time in most people. But that's it. That is as far as our area. Now, different area or other areas of science can make other claims, but within, our side of the equation, that's about as far as we can go. So I think that lays a foundation for your question. If there's any individual topic or question within that, I can, pick that apart more. Really?
Is there anything?
That is the way to.
Is there anything surprising that has come out within the past year that raises your eyebrows or surprises you?
I mean, there's always stuff that's moving. It's really, there's so many areas that you could look into. So maybe the better way to answer that is I'm always a bit temperamental in my approach to that. It's like, take temperance rather. Because maybe something did come out this year, but will it come back in the opposite next year? And so it's like, yeah, we could probably pull up a couple examples, but am I confident to say, okay, that's it, we've been doing it all wrong? No, that's not the right way to think about it. That would be a bad take on it. So I'll give you some examples. We actually published a meta-analysis. I was a co-author on. I didn't lead this project, but we did this recently, and we looked at men versus women in terms of muscle growth rate. And so the old adage, of course, most people in the general public assume that men grow muscle much faster than women do. And it's been my opinion that the research over the last probably 30 years is extremely consistent. And that men and women will grow muscle at almost the exact same relative rate. And so we ran a meta-analysis on that and published it and found the same thing. Now, you could probably pull an individual paper that has come out in the last year that would find the opposite. Some stands have, had both groups in men grew more than the women or less or something. But if you look at the collective body of the research, I don't think that has changed. So I think that would be one example of you might be fooled by somebody showing you one paper suggesting the opposite. But if you look at the totality of the research, it's pretty much still shaking up the way that we've said it has been for, again, the last 30 years.
In that particular study, were the male and the females doing the same amount of volume? Like, could you say that men could
yeah, of
tolerate
course.
more volume? Yeah.
No, when you do a meta-analysis, I think in our particular paper, I can't remember offhand, but I think that was a meta-analysis of over 35 individual studies. So what you do is you kind of combine them all and say, okay, in order to be within the 35 studies, in order to qualify, you have to have the same level of training. So we're not going to compare trained women to untrained men or things like that. They have to have read the same volume. They have to have been lifting the same number of days per week and so on and so forth. So you try to equate as many of those variables. You're not going to compare a group of old ladies to young men or, the opposite. And so you can actually tease all that stuff out statistically. And then when you do that, what do you find in the end? And that would be the numbers that we found. I mean, there's some small granular differences, but take-home messages, it's basically the same story.
The interesting thing that is popping up more and more is the idea of, mitochondrial improvement, cognitive improvement. Everybody we talk to right now is all in that space. But when it comes to strength training and muscle building, there is this part that you discussed prior where if you, during the exercise, actually think about the exercise and focus on the exercise, there will be a different result than if you go through the movement. And that just blew my mind because I think Mike and I have certainly in our lifetimes have several reps that we were somewhere, but definitely not in the gym during that rep. Can you go into detail on that, how important it is and what actually is the discrepancy between the rep when you focus on it and when you just go through the motions?
Yeah, this is actually, like if we contrast this to the answer I just gave you, this would be way less documented. It's been shown several times now. I think there's one paper like almost 20 years ago, then another came out maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. So now you're talking about 3 or 4 or 5 papers relative to that previous topic, which is dozens of papers there. So what you're really referring to is what we will now colloquially call the mind-muscle or mind-body connection. Bodybuilders, fitness people, strength coaches have been talking about this for decades with no scientific evidence. And so here's your roller coaster, Mike. 30 years ago, if you would have said this, a scientist could say, BS. There's no evidence to support this at all, because there wasn't. And then all of a sudden, evidence came and said, oh, actually, they were right here a little bit. Okay, great. Now, maybe some people will come out, 5 years from now or 2 years and says, well, actually, as long as you equate for muscle activation, the brain, I don't know. But you get the point.
Yeah.
To me, when you look at this and you say, okay, what's the potential downside? Nothing. You're more focused in training. That's only potential good. So I don't mind, even with a couple of studies here, jumping to the conclusion that says, hey, this is probably a really good idea because net negative, you're not backwards. There's no way this is going to make you get any worse at all. And so the idea basically of Optimising is super simple. It is not only executing the movement, whatever exercise you're doing, but doing it with complete focus and intent. Now, if you look at this from like the muscle hypertrophy section, this would look something like Arnold, 50 years ago, looking at the bicep in the mirror, watching it flex, right? And thinking about the muscle growing itself and really focusing, almost ignoring the rep count. I was actually just 2 days ago sitting 5 feet from Lee Haney, right? And he gave this wonderful talk, the most documented bodybuilder of all time. You want to do something like that, like how many repetitions did you do exactly? It doesn't really matter. Did you do 12 or 14? Or you're actually sort of just chasing a level of load and fatigue. Was it 78% of your 1 rep max? Was it 62%? Like those variables don't matter a ton for muscle growth as long as you're focusing on complete muscle contraction and all that. If you look at that compared to another field, sport performance part of lifting, I think Bain did this in Canada like almost 40 years ago. And he looked at actually improvements in muscle velocity. So getting physically faster. And he found the intent. So the desire to move the bar fast actually predicted eventual progress in power and velocity more than the actual barbell movement velocity. Such to say, if we were both lifting and we were doing a jump squat at 40% of our 1 rep max, Mike could do enough just to get up, and you could do enough to try to go as fast as you possibly can, even if your bar speeds were the same. The person that tried to go faster in the lifting 6 weeks later would have gotten more progress in speed and power. And so that is actually, it's still mind-body connection. It is intent. It is trying to not just execute the reps and the sets and the numbers. It is doing something where, in this case, they weren't focused on like watching the muscle grow or squeezing the muscle, but they were focused on a whole body outcome. To me, it tells the same story. It is intent is what matters, whether this is muscle growth, whether this is activation of sequence, whether this is actually a power or strength or force output. When you pay attention and you really try to get the most quality out of it, it looks like it works and it matters. So I think, again, when you start adding that up scientifically, it makes sense teleologically. It makes sense physiologically. There's evidence in multiple areas that are kind of unrelated that generally builds you pretty good confidence to saying, all right, there's something there. So I wasn't surprised when these new papers came out on the muscle hypertrophy stuff, thinking back to the old velocity stuff, and you're like, okay, yeah, I buy this. This kind of makes sense.
Is this something that you specifically have to talk to the athletes that you coach about, or is it just something that will come naturally to them? So say, for example, somebody who's already an experienced athlete, they've been in the game for 5-10 years or whatever, maybe they don't need to think about it as much in comparison to somebody who's getting into, for example, the gym for the first time. But with the people you've trained, do you still need to give them these cues to maximize the intent and that mind-muscle connection? Or for those athletes you coach, it's pretty natural?
No, actually, I would say the opposite. Early on in the development, you don't have to do this stuff. So what I don't want to do here is create a false barrier to entry. It's like, hey, if you're not focused on every single repetition, your workout's not going to do anything at all. Like, no, that's not what we're saying. It'll still do a lot and you can make a ton of progress. But if you want that last 3%, that last 5%, whether you're new into training or you're very experienced, staying that kind of focus is really hard. So even with our elite athletes, sometimes it is like every couple of repetitions, okay, lock back in. Oh yeah, great. We definitely coach this very actively. Then there's some times when you got to back down a little bit and just like let them move and feel. But I would say in general, lowly trained and highly trained probably need a lot of reminders of locking back in. This is one of the reasons why we will oftentimes, especially people are training by themselves, we will ditch earphones. The music, the scrolling, don't like this song, skip this song. Oh, alert pop up. It tends to be very distracting. And it's just really hard to kind of stay in the mode and the method there. And so oftentimes we will try to be like, no, like get that stuff out of here and stay present with the moment. Not always the case, but it's a good strategy to try if you're that person that is struggling to kind of get all the way up there every rep. But yeah, a lot of reminders happen often.
But so that muscle-mind connection, if that's so important, you get the additional benefit. Would you then, if I'm a regular athlete or a regular person who wants to train like an athlete, that preparation part becomes so important. So I love the phone part that, okay, put the phone away, put the music away, don't be in the moment. But would you then also maybe recommend how you prepare mentally for that part? Like, would you tell them, let's talk caffeine or anything else pre-workout wise, or what else you would do, breath work, whatever it is that to get in that moment? Is there something that you train them before the training?
Yeah, great. All the above, right? So sometimes we'll use pharmaceuticals, caffeine, right? Sometimes you'll use nutraceuticals or nutrition. Sometimes breath work. Yeah, so all the above. I can give you examples of professional athletes and non-athletes that we do that with. Some people respond better. Some of our people, like, I would never bring breath work up. Not going to land. Others, really impact. I'll give you another tip of something that we do quite often. Not quite often, but we use this one. And you can't pull this one out often. We will draw a physical line before you walk in the gym. And it's sort of like, stay on the other side of that line, do whatever you want to do. Check Instagram, do whatever. But the second you cross this line, you're making a decision to win a world championship right now or not. And that's a very, like, when you cross that line, when you cross onto the court, when you step onto the track, we're praying for a world championship right now. And if you're not ready for that, don't come across that line. And take however much time you want over there, but come over here and this is it. It's a real physical thing. It's just like they see that white tape on the ground and they're like, damn, it's an actual barrier, rather than just like kind of reminding them and saying that. So that's another little trick we'll do, that if someone doesn't do the other stuff or is already stimulated up or doesn't like stimulants, that's another nice little trick that we can do. And the reason I said earlier, like, you got to be a little bit careful with that is you can't ask everybody to give 99.9% every training session. You're going to run to the ground really, really hard, really fast like that. And so we will pull that out very intentionally. The kind of rule of thumb we use is something like this. 60 or so percent of your training should be about getting better, right? And so getting better is you're moving well, you're getting better technically, you're putting load on, you're putting physical work in, but we're not full send here, right? 60% of the time. Another 20 or so percent, we're competing. And so this is when we're trying to get, last time you got 8 reps, we want to get 9 reps. Last time you were at 100 kilos, now we want to get 105, whatever, right? And so you're going to be strategic. You're going to make sure your technique is great and like you want to win the number game. And then about 10% of the time, we're trying to chase death. And what that is like no pacing, no strategy here. And like, we're going to ask you to dig into something real, real, real hard. For most people working out 3 to 4 times a month, okay, so you say, or 3 to 4 times a week rather, that's going to be 10 to 12 hard workouts a month. That means 1 to 2 of those sessions, we're like really going to ask them to go after per month, right? Now, if you're training more, maybe you can get away with 3 or 4, whatever. But even when we're fighting for a world championship and we're sparring multiple times per week, that's still in that 60 to 70% range. We're working hard and they're exhausted and beat up afterwards. You're totally gassed. But there's a difference between like flip the switch on, you're fighting for a world championship right now, and you just can't hit that level, whether that's CrossFit level stuff or high rocks or endurance running or whatever, a workout session. Like you really can't get that level very often. It's just not possible. So we're pretty careful. And then our athletes know when we say like, we're going after it today, they know like, oh, okay. Like we're not playing crying wolf all the time where it's like every session is like, give me everything you have. It's like, there's a difference.
So it's,
and when athletes like that, that difference, it matters.
You're the one that's making that decision then. Like your clients aren't coming up to you saying, I'm feeling good, let's go for it today. Do you sometimes make the decision that, nah, today is not the day? And how do you make that decision?
No, great question. Depends, man. If we're 3 weeks from a fight or 3 weeks from a race or the Olympics, or we're 8 months out, those are different answers, right? If we have a fight signed, if we have a date, if we have a Super Bowl coming up, if I don't know the date, then those are different answers. So if we don't know the date or we're a long ways away, I'm more likely to be like, okay, let's see what you got today. Like, go ahead. But if we have a known target in line, a lot of the times I want them chomping at the bit. I want them going, I got more today. I'm like, great, save it. Great, save it. Because when we unleash you in that cage, I want the fury all out of you in that particular case, right? Or, there. So all of our stuff is generally pretty planned, intensity, volume, and all those things over many, many months. And so if they're in that phase where we're like, it's a red day and we're getting it and they got more, then I'll probably let them chase it. But if it is like, hey, next week is actually our big week, then we're not going to let them make that choice. And then usually I'll communicate that. Hey, the reason why we're stopping today, I know you got more, but next week is our hardest week of all camp. And I need that gas for that week. And usually you'll get like, okay, so I don't have that's my non-answer, but that is the reality. It really depends on context and phase and how close we are.
So let me then maybe translate it to a non-professional athlete. I don't have the big event. I'm 40 years old, but I want to go after it at some point. Do you think, as a trainer, from your perspective, having me not be prepared, not knowing that the day is there, that you decide when it is because you're the proactive one, is that something that's going to push my body to the limit? Was there additional benefit from that? Is me not knowing that today is the big day, will that put me in a position where going forward, my body will have to be always prepared? Is there a benefit to this?
Yeah, I mean, like it depends on what we're talking about here. Guys like you, I wouldn't hesitate to do that with, because you guys have been there before. You know what that thing feels like. If you've never done anything like that, then I'm more trepidatious because you don't know what that really looks like. And so I'd have less faith in them either stopping way too early because they don't know what hard really is, or they don't know this is going to be bad and I got to go back to work tomorrow. Like I can't tear a hamstring and then do that over there. So it depends on their background. It depends on, have we been training for 6 weeks? Then no, we're not doing that. And this is not going to happen, right? Or are we in year 6? And we've been working together for a long time and you really know what this stuff is and your tissue is tolerant to that. then I'd be more okay. So I'm way more okay doing that and like really pushing them to the limit if they have many, many consistent years of training and then being okay. The only little backside of that equation is a lot of people early, and you guys know this, early in their training, early in their physical activity thing, they think a 9 out of 10 is a 9 out of 10, and you're like, that's a 6. Like, so you got to kind of like let them, we call it touching the wall, like let them touch the wall. I don't want them to put their hand through the wall, but let them touch that occasionally. I would just tend to like to do it with a really safe movement. Do it on an aerosol bike. Do it on something where they're not going to, the risk of injury is just like you're going to throw up. Don't care. Like, fine with that. Like, you're going to lay on the floor for an hour, but nothing bad is going to happen. So it's about dosing risk in the most responsible ways possible. If that's, again, a two-sided answer.
Yeah. If there's somebody who trains relatively hard, or probably harder than the average person, and they are resistance training, they're looking to maximize hypertrophy, and they want to train like 5 or 6 times per week. Is there a training frequency that is too much? And say, for example, if somebody's training 5 times per week, is there an optimal order to choose your training sessions? Like, should you have a rest day every 3rd day or after every session or every 2 sessions?
There's actually enough research on this one. If you ask Lee Haney is going to say 3 on, 1 off.
Yeah.
Like, that's just what he does, right? You go ask other guys and they're going to go more like what you described, Mike. They're going to go 5, 6 on and then like 1 day off. That new school of thought is more of a, hey, 1 day just destroy shoulders and let the shoulders have a whole week before you come back, right? Where Lee's going to do more of the opposite, like multiple times per week. So if you look at this anecdotally, if you look at experts, people that have won championships, people that are coaching, all the way back to Mike Metzer, and then you look at the peer-reviewed literature, you're going to find the same answer here. You can win both ways. You really can. You can do the high-frequency stuff, so train the same muscle 2 or 3 times per week, as long as your total volume gets enough throughout the entire week. Or you can do it in less frequency and get there. The challenge with doing it less frequently, say 1 day a week per body part, is can you really train hard enough on that 1 day and hit enough working volume to let you roll the whole week? It absolutely can happen. Guys have done it 1,000 times, and you've seen it in research. But for the average person, I think it's harder to get that. And when you get more trained, that volume requirement goes up. And so now that becomes a harder and harder and harder thing to do. And so if you ask me, can it be done? The answer is yes. It can be done both ways. What's the optimal split? There would not be one. There would not be this is what the human body responds best to. There might be practical considerations, you and your context and preferences and whatever, but there would not be a ubiquitous answer. That said, I think most people are probably going to do a little bit better on average by doing things just a touch more frequently and not as nearly as damaging than coming back from a week off. So slight hedge towards that one would be my preference.
So the good thing is what you just said is a lot of people who work out regularly, the hardest day for them is actually the rest day, is the day where they don't go to the gym, where they don't get that spike, don't get dopamine. And one of the things you said is that you said previously was one of the things that most need personalization is actually the recovery aspect. And why is recovery so unique to most people? And why is that the one thing that, if you say hypertrophy, is like you do this and you do those sets, but that's the one thing that it's the hardest, to pinpoint. This is the best for most. Actually, no, it's actually almost individual every single time.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at like the classic responders versus no responder stuff, so trying to figure out why some of these people just don't grow at the same thing. And the best evidence we have now suggests those people need more volume. Okay. Well, the reality is if that volume requirement ever exceeds their recovery capacity, then it doesn't work either. I can tell you from a lot of the biopsy stuff we've done, there's not extensive evidence behind this, but it does seem to be like people that are really fast twitch just get way more sore and cannot handle the volume that other people can. If you're really slow twitch, you probably need a lot more volume. You need less taper, and you're going to recover a lot faster. You don't get as sore. And so if me being a generally very fast twitch guy, and I tried to hang on to the volume that a slow twitch person did, everything would break on me. Just joints wouldn't hold up, injuries would happen, and I've just been down that road a billion times. I respond way better to way less volume, way higher intensity, and way more rest. And then other people that are opposite, I've trained a bunch of them, coached a bunch of them, and there's like, you got to hit them, and you got to hit them frequently, and you just got to keep going with more volume until they start getting through the roof. Why is that individualized? It's everything from genomic profiles to anabolic receptor density in muscle, to hormonal balances, to all things in between. And then there's a whole host of lifestyle factors that kick into it. Everything from your water quality and air quality, to your gut microbiome, to your micronutrient composition, to your sleeping schedule, to your mental health. All of that kicks into allostatic load. And so if your allostatic load on these non-specific stressors is higher than you want it to be, well, then your ability to handle these specific stressors in the form of the strength training starts getting crowded out by the non-specific stressors. So that eats away at your recovery capacity. So the reality of it is, if you are, training, sleeping, eating all day, you're going to have a higher recovery capacity relative to somebody who's then going to work in between all those things, right? So personal, individual, genomic differences aside, that's going to be there. And so all of it counts. Every aspect. You can't name a part of someone's lifestyle or individual background that won't account to that recovery capacity thing. So some folks that are just either really lucky or really, really dialed can get away with that, small recovery window. And then folks on the other end of the spectrum, of course, need to have a lot more intuition and active work towards that recovery side.
For those people that have optimized their programming and their lifestyle, could you argue that those individuals would not require any sort of deload week? They could just train every single week?
No, I don't think that would be the case, because you're going to hit a physiological limit pretty quick.
Even if you were to adapt and change the programming?
Yeah, because we've seen that. We work with, just this week, we had two guys finish in the top 10, the PGA Championship. We had a guy come back and play a Major League Baseball game for the first time in 3 years. We had another guy sign the highest contract in the NFL. No, that's the last 7 days for us. So as to say, I know what this looks like when you have $500 million to use, and this is your only thing you have to pay attention to. And they still have to deload. There's just no way around all those things. You pick your sport, you pick your thing. We've dealt with it. And there is just a spot when you get to when you're like, we need to throttle down here. And we have full-time massage therapists and full-time chiropractors and chefs at their house and all that. And like, that lets you train way harder, but you're training way harder now. Like you're going way harder. And so eventually you got to back things down.
Is that 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks? When do you need to deload?
Yeah, all the above. Right?
It
like
depends.
We generally don't work on things like Yeah. Honestly, the way that we do it typically is not specifically to weeks, because now back to your thing, but even like, these are athletes. So we have schedules. Preseason, postseason, off-season, OTAs, major tournaments. And so we tend to use those landmarkers rather than weeks. I was saying basically like, hey, if we have like 9 weeks between this and when we got to report to training camp, we're going to build a 9-week camp. I don't really care. I'm not going to do it at 6 weeks and then have this like 2 week of dead space, whatever. So it's really specific to the strategy, and we'll ramp those weeks then over time based on if we know we have 10 weeks for fight camp, or we know we've got this much time between the next major or the Ryder Cup or whatever. So it is there. You can do any of it, I guess, is the point. But we just have to know what we're giving up and what we're going after.
How would a person know? How would a person know if they're predominantly fast twitch or slow twitch?
Well, the gold standard way would be get a muscle biopsy done, but most people, of course, can't do that. The other, like back of the envelope way to do it is there is a classic leg extension test called a Thorstensen 50 repetition test. So if you are around any kind of sports science lab or university, you might be able to pay $100 and get something like this tested. And basically, you do 50 repetitions as fast as you can of a leg extension, and how fast you fall off in terms of fatigue will determine, and then total power output and force output determine fast twitch. If you don't have access to either one of those things, you can know pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think I'm fast twitch.
Yeah. If you do 2 or 3 repetitions. off.
My endurance on leg extensions is not very high.
Listen,
Yeah.
I have this is complete coincidence time-wise, but this morning I received a DNA test result, including that I have ligaments that are not very strong and tear easily, which after 4-torn ACLs 20 years ago was interesting to read. And the second thing was that I'm very good equipped for heavy weightlifting. And it takes my body very, very long to lose body fat. And I'm sitting there at 40 years old. Like, all those things were part of my life for last as long as I can think. And I'm like, causality, correlation, is this true? When you meet with a person, with a client, do you even look at those things? Do you pay attention to this? Does it make sense? Or is this just, marketing that people...
It's mostly nonsense, almost entirely nonsense. Yeah, like something like that. I could go very long on this topic, but here's what I'll say. Something like that, you probably got a test done where it looked at 5 or 20 or maybe 100 what are called polymorphisms or SNPs, right?
Yeah.
You got to remember, you have close to 19,500 genes, and each one of those genes has hundreds, if not thousands, of interactions and functions. And then you looked at 5. So, like, how much did you really understand about the entire situation? Here's an example. Something like how tall you are. Just how tall you are. That takes 20 to 25,000 different genes to predict how actual tall you are. And again, you looked at 2 or 3 or whatever. Your body composition, you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of genes that will go into that. And all of those will explain less than 1% of your actual what's called your phenotype. So what do you actually look like and feel like and perform? And so depending on which marker you're looking at here, some of these are more and some of them are less predictive. But the reality of it is they're telling you potential. But then your proteome, your phenotype actually tell you what's actually really there. So it doesn't make really any sense to pay attention to that. There are some cases wherein genetic testing is helpful for very specific clinical diseases, cystic fibrosis and other things like that. Really, really helpful to know if you're having one of these rare mutations. But for like a sport performance, health performance thing, there's a couple of other things. Again, I give you direct examples, which are like, okay. But the ones you mentioned, actually the ligament thing is the closest to like actually okay. But like fiber type and fast twitch or slow twitch and body composition, they're not. I'll give you a direct number. If you take the 5, there's like 5 or 7 different SNPs that are the most predictive of body composition. That's going to determine something like 0.1 kilogram of body fat difference.
Yeah.
So like you tell me, it's not fake, it's not a lie, but like it told you the difference between, your 80 kilos versus your 80.2. Great. Like,
makes no difference.
Not very useful. Yeah. So it depends on like, again, they're not making stuff up, but are they exaggerating the usefulness of it? Yeah, for sure. So we have unlimited access for our programs, have no budget generally on biomarkers. We test hundreds and hundreds of biomarkers and we don't do genetics.
That's interesting. I was thinking of doing it, but now I feel like there's no point.
I spent $3,500 on that. Yeah, it was interesting. Hey, no, I'm glad. This is a very, very valuable conversation. I'm not going to name the DNA company. But speaking of that, that triggered one thing that when you said that we're talking about a percentile of a percentile that of an impact perspective. And when we're talking about recovery, there's a lot of things that everybody's popping up at every social feed. Everybody's ice plunging. Everybody does sauna, infrared saunas, and all those things. And one of the research that I saw was that the impact of growth hormone release after a sauna is hundreds and hundreds of fold increasing. And then I heard you saying that just because there's a spike, guys, it doesn't mean your muscles are actually growing. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for everybody who's now in the sauna every single night after every single workout?
Look, I'll probably leave this exact recording and go get in the sauna. not like probably, like I will. It's actually on right now. Like, quit waiting. I got to do this. And I got another one after this, and then I'll be in there later, right? Wife's in there right now. I love it. So I don't need this to say that it's not that great. I think it's helpful. I'll do it sometimes when I'll try to convey what we'll call like a molecular mechanism. So what's happening cellularly, why this thing is working, right? And sometimes as a teaching tool, that's an okay thing. Where we get lost is when we exaggerate or we use the molecular mechanism to outshine the actual full body effect. And this is one particular case. If you had a 60% rise in growth hormone, most people hear that and be like, damn, growth hormone sounds anabolic. Okay, first of all, guys, it's not. That's not what growth hormone does. Growth hormone is not testosterone, right? An endogenous growth hormone release is not an anabolic growth factor, right? It's just not. If you're a 9-year-old, it's super helpful, but a 39-year-old, it's not. Like, that's what testosterone is for. Number two, a 60% rise is an absolute difference of almost nothing to that, right? And so if you were to look at the abnormal magnitude of how growth hormone works, but people don't understand that context, right? Like, that's a really difficult thing. So I don't want to come off the wrong way again, because I think the sauna use is great. It's just, if you're using it for that purpose, you're in the wrong realm. There is some research that suggests, and there's more now coming out with things like hot water immersion post lifting is equal, if not greater, for muscle growth. So again, we don't want to forget, like, it's what I call the thing is lost in the thing, right? So sometimes when the thing is lost in the thing, what you care about right now is, do I use the sauna? Do I use the hot water? Yes or no? And the answer is yes. Now, if you're explaining why and you're getting that explanation wrong, okay, like, I'd love to clean you up there. But the reality is, I don't want you to think just because that explanation wrong means the actual behavior is wrong. So still a good idea to do the sauna for a million other reasons. It's just the rationale people are giving as to why you should do it is all kinds of screwy. So yeah, the growth hormone thing is not a big deal really at all. And you also have to remember, you're not talking about an exhaustive amount of literature here that does it. And you're not talking about a response that matters that much. There's 1,000 things you could do to get growth hormone to jump way up in the air. That's not what matters. What matters is, what does the research say on actual muscle growth and recovery and sleep and things like that? And that research is generally pretty positive. So it's a good thing to do.
So it's not only good for overall health, heart health, but for body composition as well. Saunas.
But potentially, the way that I say it is, if you have access to one, it's not that crazy, and you have the space and time, then we have a potential neutral to positive effect, right? Whether it's going to do much for body fat, I doubt you're going to see much benefit there. Maybe at the end range, you might get a little bit. And it has the potential to be neutral or slightly positive for muscle growth and recovery. Okay. So if that's saying, though, like, hey, I can barely afford to pay rent here, and now I'm going to go spend $3,000 on a sauna, but I haven't addressed and then you guys fill in the blank, right? Other more impactful things. Then that's when we start to have a problem, saying, hey, you don't have to do this to be healthy. You don't have to do this at all. And that's where I think the people that push back on stuff like this, that's what they're trying to defend. So, like, let's not go out there running and getting saunas and cold plunges or anything when we could be doing these other more impactful, more robust, more well-rounded things in our health. But to me, if you're checking all those off and then you have the means and the intent to add the sauna, generally going to be a net neutral to positive effect for most people.
And for somebody like me who is just purely interested in being as jacked as possible, would you generally say avoid the cold plunge?
I just don't see a huge rationale to do it.
Yeah.
If there's other reasons why we would, I have one down there next to my sauna. Again, I've been doing it for over 20 years. Well over that. I like it, but I'm not going to make an argument that it helps body composition. Certainly not going to make an argument that cold plunging makes you live any longer. If I get in the cold plunge and I'm currently as sore as I am in this very second, I feel a lot better. I will feel better tomorrow. But not everyone feels that way. So we will use it with some of our athletes. We not use it for others. So it depends, like you said earlier. But if it's in your system and you like it, great. Would not rush out to make sure you have a cold plunge, though. That it's like a have-to-have, negotiable, or anything like that.
So the thing with the net neutral, and this is something that comes up regularly, so sauna, it's definitely not bad, it might not be good. So cold plunge, definitely not bad, might be good. Eating protein before going to bed, definitely not bad, might be good, but it's probably neutral. But now comes a question that I'm listening to, I'm like, okay, so what's the good one? So what is the ones that you're like, generally guys, okay, we're talking about the 3% extra, the 5% extra, but what is the foundation? What is the foundation when you're like, hey, this is the golden rules that have proven to over time and time. If you're the guy or you're the girl who wants to build lean muscle, stick to this. This is foundation, and we take everything else as you desire.
Yeah. So the way that I'll say it is, we will often throw out the saying that the methods are many and the concepts are few. So that's what we're kind of going after here. The concepts that like everybody generally has to have at a bare minimum to say grow muscle is really, really low, such that you have to do something that is challenging, putting tension on the muscle. There has to be some aspect of progressive overload. You want to balance variety with specificity. You want to be consistent over time. Like it's all this really generic stuff that is the floor, right? You have to have some minimal amount of protein and you have to be in some sort of caloric surplus one way or the other. It's going to be the stuff that most people are pretty aware of. And I say that to say we've seen people have progress in all these areas when they have higher volume or lower volume, when they have higher protein or lower protein, higher carbs, or fast or don't fast, or eat 6 meals a day or eat 2 meals a day. Like we've seen all these variations work. And so there really is not that many things you have to do. You have to do at all costs to have progress in the gym. There are certainly some that I would like settle on personally that I just think are better. But I wouldn't say like every single person has to do them.
The best thing to do is probably just to not train, just do nothing and get a good night's sleep.
I think the best way to think about this stuff is you have infinite options, right? But what's actually really clear in the research is having a plan will always exceed not having a plan. And that sounds like stupid, but it's very, very clear. Write down a plan, a training plan, a recovery plan, a sleep plan, a diet, write it all down. I don't even care how accurate it is. But the fact that you have something down, you will get greater results than if you have nothing down. So worst case scenario is people just make everything up as they go. That is a like almost ground truth recipe of not going to go well for most people. We can tweak, adjust, adapt the plan. We can argue over the plan later. But that act of having some strategy down, if you have that strategy, it allows you to do the next two most important things. Be consistent and adhere to your program. If you are consistent with training and nutrition, like roughly consistent, don't have to be 100%, and you progress, you're going to get results. That is like pretty much a bare minimum. If not, that's what leads to wild inconsistencies and you don't realize it because you don't have anything directly to reflect back onto. You think you've been consistent. You've been training hard. You think you've been eating pretty well, but that one day was a little bit 10%, a little bit less. And you ate a little bit more than you thought here and there. And that's what actually leads to like man, I've been training so hard and dieting so hard for 6 months and I haven't got anywhere. Really? Have you been really following the plan? Have you been writing it? Are you sure you're on target? Most likely you aren't. So if you do those things, stay consistent over time, you're very likely to make progress.
Yeah. I have a question about running and building muscle. It's quite a common thing, particularly because nowadays everybody's part of some sort of a run club. And even myself, I started off the year doing a 5-kilometer run every week, which is like the most running I've done more than like the past 5 years of running. In my head, I visually could see that my legs were not as big as they would have been if I wasn't doing that running. Now, is it just a fact, like if you want to maximize muscle hypertrophy and get your legs as big as possible, do you have to just cut out the running, or can you get away with doing a little bit of it?
So that's a really good question. What you're referring to is what we would call the interference effect, right? And this is actually something that I've changed my tune on and changed position on in the last, say, 5 or 8 years based upon new research. And so it is true. If you put more volume in a catabolic way, then that's going to compromise muscle growth or even potentially catabolize it down. So think about it basically this way. It's an energy game. If you ask your legs to burn a whole lot more energy, it doesn't have enough energy left to produce muscle growth. And so the one thought here is, well, the one that actually demonstrated effect, if you do something like add running to your regimen and you're trying to grow your legs, then you have to go up way more calories. That's number one, because we're just not even meeting energetic demands for muscle growth. But the other thing to think about is the tissue damage. And that's really an easy story because we actually published a meta-analysis or a review on this a number of years ago. Kevin Murach, Murach, first author there. And one of the things you'll see is a really clear difference between interference effects between running and cycling and swimming and rowing. Running has a really large interference effect. It is eccentric landing on the legs, right? You're beating them up. Cycling has a far less interference effect. And it's easy to think about. Both have energetic demands, but the running has more muscle damage demands. And so if you go on the bike a little bit and then you keep your calories sufficient, then it's not going to interfere with that much muscle growth. The other big thing to consider here is the total volume. So if you get on and you say, like, I run a mile every day in the morning, that might limit muscle growth for a few weeks or months, but you're going to be so efficient and effective at that. And you're, jogging a 10-minute mile. That's not going to do anything. It's limited. If you're running 5K every day, well, then now that's a difference. If you're running 20K every day, now you have a huge effect. And so the amount of actual damage, the mode of exercise you select, the frequency, as well as the total durational work that you do, all will influence the magnitude of interference or not. I was just in South Carolina this weekend at an event called Summer Strong, where you have all these, Bill Gillespie was there. Bill benched 1,000 pounds a couple of years ago at like 62 years old or something, right? One of the most legendary guys of all time. Like I mentioned, Lee Haney was there. You got all kinds of elite level powerlifters. We saw a bunch of people deadlift over 700 and squat over 700. It's not even like a training. It's a conference. People just started lifting in the hall. And we have a 3-time Olympic gold medalist in shot put. Just got out there and started throwing shot put, and we're doing all this stuff, right? This came up a lot. And almost all of them said, I wish I would have done a little more conditioning in my career. Like, I really wish I would have done more of that stuff. I would have felt better. Travis Mash was there, still world record holder in powerlifting and competed weightlifting, coaches people. Most people say, I wish I would have done a little bit more like low level intensity conditioning stuff. So I think you can, you clearly can, but just be mindful again of the exercise mode, total energy output, frequency, and duration.
They're saying they wish they'd done more. Why? For health benefit? Okay.
Well, that is a huge one.
Yeah.
But even for like performance, felt like their recovery would have been better. Felt like they could have stayed a little bit leaner, kept their weight down a little bit, and it wouldn't have impacted their recovery capacity and growth at all.
Okay. So speaking for the avid gym goer, not professional athlete. So this is literally, if you look at my last 12 months, me going to the gym, there's me going in, doing 1 hour of low intensity bike ride before lifting, then hearing this is not good for muscle growth, then doing first lifting and then doing the 1 hour bike ride, then doing 15 minutes, doing the muscle lifting and then 45 minutes and splitting it up. And I'm still I'm 12 months in. I still have no clue. Should I do it? I know maybe I should split it into different exercises. Is there any impact or difference? What should you do when you get into the gym? Is cardio before, after, both?
General rule of thumb is do what you are most prioritizing first when you're the freshest. So in you, I'm just assuming the preference is strength, muscle growth, something like that. If you're going to do the bike for an hour, I would definitely do it at the end, not the beginning. If you're especially trying to maximize something that requires quality, so exercise technique, skill development, power, strength, then you absolutely want to do any conditioning or endurance at the end. If you're only caring about like muscle growth or muscle conditioning, you could get away with doing some of it before, a little bit of like a pre-fatigue.
Yeah. And
you'd probably be fine there. No big deal. But for the most part, what I would say is do a far more effective warm-up than you think. So, like a lot of people go in there and just do a couple of quick warm-up things and they get into their working set. So doing a really high quality warm-up is a good idea. If you're going to do something really like that, where you're going 30, 45, 60 minutes, I'm probably doing that on another day.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least at minimum 4, 5, 6, 8 hours differently throughout the day. Like we're doing it at way separated. That's generally the way. Best case scenario, separate day. Second best scenario, separate session, separated by many hours. Third best after lifting. And then fourth best, just deal with it.
Yeah, for me, I think I've found the best results when I just do it on a separate day. When I go to the gym, I just go focus on lifting the weights and then I'm out.
You go straight into the weights?
Yeah, with the warm up has got a little bit longer with each year that I get older.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation for the most part.
Yeah, nice, very good,
Awesome. Andy, thank you so much for your time. Truly appreciate the insights. Truly appreciate the feedback. Again, you've impacted us much more than you can imagine. All the way over here in Dubai. A lot of things that we're doing, we're actually re-listening to what you were saying, what we've been saying in the past. I'm literally thinking about the reps. I'm thinking about what's going on. I even started not fearing protein at night anymore. So there's a lot of stuff that I've learned after listening to you. So thank you so much for the impact that you have.
Yeah, and I'm still waiting to meet you in person.
Yes,
it's the second remote call. Like,
yes, we definitely did. I mean, hopefully June works out. And we would love to host you in person.
Yeah, man, I'll get out there. We're gonna hang out. We'll lift some weights, and then we'll figure out some more fun to do together, guys. Let's keep the fire going.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you much. Thanks, Andy. Have a great day.